Welcome to today's in-depth exploration of a tectonic shift reshaping the global economy. The world is moving away from a unipolar order dominated by one superpower toward a multipolar future, where influence is shared among emerging powers. At the forefront of this transformation is the BRICS alliance: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and a growing roster of partner nations. Among them, Bolivia, a small South American country, is emerging as a critical player thanks to its vast lithium reserves and strategic alignment with BRICS. Meanwhile, the United States is scrambling to protect the dollar's dominance as BRICS nations, led by China, push for de-dollarization and new trade systems. In this video, we'll dive into Bolivia's rise, the BRICS alliance's bold ambitions, and why Washington is sounding the alarm. Buckle up. This is a story of resources, power, and a battle for the future of global trade. Let's get started. Section 1. Bolivia's strategic rise in the Lithium Triangle, Bolivia. A nation of roughly 12 million people with a GDP of approximately 46 billion may seem like an unlikely global player. Yet its vast natural resources and strategic moves are putting it on the map. Bolivia is part of the Lithium Triangle alongside Chile and Argentina, which collectively hold over 75% of the world's lithium reserves beneath their salt flats. Lithium, often called white gold, is a cornerstone of the clean energy revolution, powering batteries in smartphones, laptops, electric vehicles, and grid-scale energy storage systems. With global lithium demand growing at nearly 9% annually and projected to accelerate as nations race to meet net zero targets, Bolivia's reserves are a treasure trove. The country is home to the Salar de Uyuni, the world's largest salt flat, which conceals one of the richest lithium deposits on Earth. Beyond lithium, Bolivia is a major exporter of natural gas, zinc, tin, and precious metals. In just the first quarter of 2024, Bolivia exported $136 million in zinc ores, $113 million in natural gas, and $110 million in precious metal ores. These resources make Bolivia a critical supplier in global markets, particularly for nations seeking to diversify energy and mineral supplies. In 2024, Bolivia took a bold step by joining the BRICS alliance as a partner state during the group's annual summit. Alongside countries like Belarus, Cuba, Kazakhstan, and Malaysia, Bolivia now participates in BRICS meetings and summits, though it holds a lower status than full members like Brazil or China. This partnership is a game changer. Bolivia's president has publicly stated the country's ambition to achieve full BRICS membership, signalling a desire to deepen ties with non-Western powers. Our state has taken an essential step toward joining BRICS, he declared, emphasising the country's commitment to this new economic bloc. Let's explain this in simple terms. BRICS is a coalition of countries working to create a fairer global economy, one less dependent on Western institutions like the International Monetary Fund or the US dollar. For Bolivia, joining BRICS means access to new trade partners, investment opportunities, and a platform to challenge the Western-dominated economic order. Its lithium reserves make it a valuable ally as clean energy is a top priority for BRICS nations like China, which is investing heavily in electric vehicles and renewable energy. Bolivia's alignment with BRICS also reflects a broader trend among global South nations seeking to assert their sovereignty. Historically, Bolivia's resources have been both a blessing and a curse. In 2019, former President Evo Morales, the country's first indigenous leader, faced a controversial election. Despite winning, mass protests and allegations of fraud amplified by the Organization of American States, which is heavily influenced by the US, forced Morales to resign and flee to Argentina. Many analysts argue that Bolivia's lithium wealth made it a target as Western powers sought to maintain control over its resources. This history underscores why Bolivia is now turning to BRICS for partnerships that respect its sovereignty. China, in particular, has emerged as a key ally. Unlike Western nations, China emphasizes mutual respect in its dealings with Bolivia. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi recently stated, "Latin America is the home of the Latin American people, not any country's backyard." This respect for sovereignty has fostered strong trade ties, with China importing Bolivia's minerals and natural gas while exporting machinery, hardware, and textiles. Since 2024, Bolivia has used the Chinese yuan for trade settlements, reducing its reliance on the dollar during an economic crisis when its central bank faced a shortage of US currency. Bolivia's story is just one piece of a larger puzzle. BRICS is building a new economic framework that challenges the US-led financial system. Let's explore how this alliance is reshaping global trade and why de-dollarization is at the heart of it. BRICS and the de-dollarization movement. The BRICS alliance is no longer just a club of emerging economies, it's a force reshaping global trade. Originally formed by Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, BRICS has expanded to include Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Indonesia, and the United Arab Emirates, with more nations like Bolivia joining as partners. This growing bloc represents over 3.2 billion people and a combined GDP exceeding $28 trillion, rivaling the G7. Their mission? To create a multipolar world where no single nation dominates trade or finance. A key pillar of this mission is de-dollarization, reducing reliance on the US dollar for global trade. In the first 9 months of 2024, China's trade with BRICS members reached $650 billion and 5.1% increase from the previous year. Remarkably, 54.3% of China's cross-border trade was settled in local currencies like the yuan, Indian rupees, or Russian rubles, while only 41.4% used dollars. This shift is monumental, as the dollar has long been the world's reserve currency, giving the US unparalleled economic influence. Let's explain this in simple terms. When countries trade in dollars, the US benefits because it controls the currency's value and can impose sanctions by restricting dollar access. De-dollarization means countries use their own currencies like the yuan or reals, which weakens US control. BRICS is building systems like BRICS Pay, a digital payment platform, and currency swaps to make this possible. These systems allow countries to trade directly, bypassing US banks and sanctions. Brazil, for example, recently signed a $28 billion currency swap agreement with China, valid for 5 years. This deal ensures that in times of financial stress, Brazil and China can exchange yuan and reals without needing dollars, stabilizing their economies. Bolivia has also adopted the yuan for trade, a lifeline during its 2024 economic crisis when dollar shortages threatened its middle class. These moves are part of a broader strategy to create a sanction-proof economic bloc. China is leading this charge. At the 2025 ASEAN and Gulf Cooperation Council Summit, Beijing promoted yuan-based trade and investment deals with Southeast Asia and the Middle East, regions traditionally tied to the Western financial system. China has established yuan clearing centres in the UAE and Saudi Arabia and launched pilot projects for digital yuan settlements with Central Asian and Middle Eastern partners. The inclusion of energy giants like Iran and Venezuela in BRICS further strengthens this network, as they supply oil and gas in non-dollar currencies. BRICS' vision extends beyond trade. The alliance aims to create an economic circle with major growth poles, regions that drive prosperity through investment and innovation. For instance, China's $4.5 billion investment in Brazilian industries, from electric vehicles to green energy, is part of this strategy. By fostering economic interdependence, BRICS is building a system that can withstand Western sanctions and economic pressure. Transition. As BRICS gains momentum, the US is pushing back with a mix of tariffs, diplomacy, and threats. But is this enough to stop the alliance's rise? Let's examine Washington's response and why it's struggling to maintain control. The US counteroffensive, tariffs, and divide and conquer. The United States is in a state of alarm over BRICS' growing influence. The dollar's dominance is under threat, and Washington is fighting back with a combination of economic pressure and strategic diplomacy. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has been vocal, warning that BRICS' push to abandon the dollar is not the best way to make friends. With the US President, Donald Trump has escalated this rhetoric, threatening 100% tariffs on BRICS nations unless they commit to using the dollar and abandon plans for a common currency or alternative financial systems. Let's explain this in simple terms. Tariffs are taxes on imported goods, making them more expensive. By threatening high tariffs, Trump hopes to force BRICS countries to rely on the dollar to avoid economic losses. For example, Brazil faces a trade deficit with the US, and new tariffs could devastate its exports. The US is also offering incentives like favourable trade deals and military contracts to pull BRICS members away from the alliance. India is a prime target. As a nation balancing ties with the West and BRICS, India is seen as a potential weak link. Lutnick has urged India to open its markets, buy US weapons, and distance itself from Russia and the BRICS pay system.
There were certain things that the Indian government did that generally rubbed the United States the wrong way. For instance, you generally buy your military gear from Russia. That's a way to kind of get up, under the skin of America if you're going to buy your armaments from Russia. India is starting to move towards buying the military equipment from the United States, which then goes a long way. And these kind of things, just creating that relationship, being a part of BRICS, right? Which is, let's move to not support the dollar and dollar hegemony. That's not really the way to make friends and influence people in America. So, and that's how you move on to a really positive place, is put it on the table, address it straight on, resolve it straight on, and get to a really good place. And I think that's where we are.
The subtext is clear. Align with the US or face economic consequences. Brazil is also under pressure, with the Pentagon strengthening military ties to counter its drift toward BRICS. In May 2025, Admiral Elvin Halsey visited Brazil, officially for defence talks, but signalling a broader effort to pull the country back into the US orbit. However, this strategy is backfiring. Instead of weakening BRICS, US tariffs are pushing countries closer to China. Brazil's Finance Minister Fernando Haddad confirmed in May 2025 that the country is negotiating with the US to avoid tariffs, but is simultaneously deepening ties with China. The $28 billion currency swap with China is a clear sign of Brazil's commitment to de-dollarization. Similarly, Bolivia's use of the yuan shows how smaller nations are finding alternatives to US financial systems. The US is also grappling with its trade war with China. In May 2025, a 90-day tariff truce, known as the Geneva Agreement, collapsed amid mutual accusations. The US lowered tariffs on Chinese goods from 145% to 30%, and China reduced tariffs on US products from 125% to 10%, but both sides claim violations. The US accuses China of delaying rare earth exports, critical for defense and technology, while China points to US bans on AI, chips, and Huawei, as well as visa restrictions on Chinese students. Let's explain this in simple terms. Rare earths like lithium are metals used in high-tech products, from magnets in robotics to military equipment. China controls 87% of the global refined supply, giving it significant leverage. The US needs these materials to build its factory of the future, but its sanctions on Chinese tech companies like Huawei complicate negotiations. This creates a paradox. The US must borrow from China to buy materials from China to counter China. A recent phone call between Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping sparked speculation. Initiated by Trump, the call was the first direct contact since his second inauguration, but no concrete outcomes have been announced. Some analysts believe China delayed the call to avoid appearing weak, while others see it as a sign of Beijing's confidence in its sanction-proof supply chains. Trump faces domestic pressure, with US businesses and consumers complaining that tariffs raise prices and disrupt supply chains. On June 4, 2025, Trump admitted on Truth Social that negotiating with Xi is extremely hard, highlighting the challenges ahead. The US-China standoff and Bolivia's rise within BRICS point to a broader question: what does this mean for the global economy and who will shape its future? Let's bring it all together. The stakes of a multipolar world. The BRICS alliance, with Bolivia as its newest partner, is rewriting the rules of global trade. Bolivia's lithium and other resources position it as a key player in the clean energy revolution, while its BRICS partnership amplifies its influence. If Bolivia achieves full membership, it could become a model for how smaller nations leverage alliances to boost economic growth and assert global influence. For BRICS, Bolivia's inclusion sends a powerful message. Even smaller countries can play vital roles in a multipolar world where no single power dominates. The broader BRICS strategy is equally ambitious. By expanding trade in local currencies and building systems like BRICS Pay, the alliance is creating a financial architecture that bypasses the dollar. China's leadership is critical, with its $650 billion trade with BRICS members and investments in regions like Latin America and the Middle East. The ASEAN and GCC summit showcased China's vision, a sanction-proof economic bloc that drives prosperity without Western interference. However, the US tariffs and divide-and-conquer tactics pose risks. The OECD projects that Trump's tariffs will hit the US economy hardest, reducing growth to 1.6% in 2025, compared to a global average drop of 0.2%. BRICS economies like China, India, and Brazil are more insulated thanks to diversified trade networks. Japan, heavily reliant on US markets, faces a sharper decline, illustrating the dangers of dollar dependence. The dollar's role as the world's reserve currency is the linchpin of US economic power. It allows Washington to borrow at low rates, fund military spending, and sustain social programs. But de-dollarization threatens this system. Banks like JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley predict a dollar collapse by 2026 if demand for US bonds drops. Countries like China could sell their US Treasury holdings, driving up borrowing costs and forcing the US to choose between defaulting, printing money, or cutting spending, none of which are viable long-term solutions. Let's explain this in simple terms. The dollar's strength depends on global demand. If countries trade in yuan or other currencies, they need fewer dollars, weakening the US economy. Trump's tariffs aim to reduce the US trade deficit, but they're pushing countries toward China, which offers cheaper goods and currency flexibility. This could trigger a domino effect, eroding the dollar's value and raising costs for American consumers. A new world order in the making. The rise of Bolivia and BRICS signals a profound shift in the global order. Bolivia's lithium wealth and strategic alignment with BRICS position it as a key player in the clean energy revolution and the push for a multipolar world. Meanwhile, BRICS de-dollarization efforts, led by China and Brazil, challenge the US-led financial system at its core. Washington's response, tariffs, threats, and attempts to fracture BRICS may slow this shift, but it's also alienating allies and accelerating the move away from the dollar. The stakes couldn't be higher. If BRICS succeeds, nations like Bolivia could gain unprecedented influence, and the dollar's dominance could fade, ushering in a new era of economic fairness. But if the US manages to divide BRICS, it might preserve its financial power, at least temporarily. The outcome hinges on whether BRICS can stay united and whether Trump's trade war backfires. What do you think? Will BRICS reshape the global economy, or will the US hold on to its dominance? Can Bolivia leverage its resources to become a global player? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let's keep the conversation going. If you found this analysis insightful, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more deep dives into the forces shaping our world. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.